Hey guys, Maniac here with GameAccess.net doing my next What Was Cut. And to kind of stick with my PC gaming roots, you can't really get much more PC gamer old school than Half-Life 2, or the Half-Life series in general. Half-Life 2 has a really close place in my heart, and for several reasons. One in particular that I actually was one of the first people to get to see it at E3 2003. I also got to see it at E3 2004, and I was one of the first people to be informed that Counter-Strike Source was coming out. It was, you know, it's a series that, the whole Half-Life 2 series was just something that always just kind of stuck with me. Not just having a chance to see those games early on, but also for the factor that I got to play Counter-Strike Source early on, was one of the first people to test it, all that good stuff. So, there's that. Also, there was a lot of cool stuff cut from that game, and I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit. Now, I wanted to preface this by saying that what I'm about to tell you is not stuff, I'm not talking about cuts like, oh, they changed this level, or oh, they changed that level, and stuff like that. I think everybody who's seen the original Half-Life 2 E3 2003 demo knows that Ravenholm's final version was different than the Ravenholm that they saw in that video. I'm not going to be talking about that because Ravenholm stayed in the game. It's not that I'm going to be talking about. What I'm going to be talking about would be things like characters that were removed, or character traits that were altered, or entire levels that ended up, or levels that were changed, or bits of levels that were changed, and that sort of thing. And I kind of was thinking, oh, where do you start with that kind of conversation? I was thinking, we're better to start than the beginning. Now, it's the beginning of Half-Life 2 went through several iterations. I mean, the game was in development for about 5 years. But I think what was so important about it was that it changed a lot, but it always had the same basic theme to it, which was the same basic theme that ended up in the final version of the game. Gordon is out of place, out of time, doesn't know where he is, or what the G-Man's purpose is for him. The game starts off with this very cryptic speech by the G-Man, leading to Gordon finding himself somewhere that he doesn't know where or when he is, but in the same basic state as when the first Half-Life game ended. And he's basically told by the G-Man, the right man in the wrong place will make all the difference in the world. I'm sorry, can make all the difference in the world. And I believe that. And I think that's what strikes a chord and what the major theme of what Half-Life 2 was when it came down to it. I mean, you can talk about, the initial design document made this much more clear. You can talk about till you're blue in the face what it's like to be oppressed. I mean, everybody has, and I'm not going to make any jokes or any references to anybody who is being oppressed around the world. But what the G-Man was trying to come across was that oppression is kind of an interesting thing in the fact of, if you've been oppressed for so long, then you kind of get used to it. Or at the very least, oppression over time is a huge demoralizing factor. The longer you're oppressed, the less likely you are to revolt against your oppressors. And the reason why is because that you're so demoralized over so much horrendous activity that it almost becomes commonplace. Every atrocity will become common to you. No matter how horrible the world is getting, no matter how horrible your life is. You could have a thought, you know, you could have a revolutionary thought, certainly, but you'll literally be too weak, too hopeless, too depressed to even think about it. But Gordon Freeman missed that. Gordon Freeman wasn't part of the oppression, or wasn't there for when people were being oppressed. Gordon Freeman knew what it was like to breathe fresh oxygen. Gordon Freeman knew what it was like to taste freedom. He knew what freedom was. And then the G-Man took that free guy and put him in oppression, knowing, as he said it, the right man in the wrong place would make all the difference in the world. The original scene this would have taken place was almost like this just open grassland, kind of lush, vegetative place. We don't know if it's real, we don't know if this is imaginary, if this is something that the G-Man has created. So the G-Man starts talking about all these themes about becoming numb to the lash and over time and everything else. And as he's talking, Gordon is staying the same, and the G-Man is staying the same in appearance. But the world around them is changing. It's going from having actual vegetation to becoming sparse, becoming desolate, becoming a wasteland almost. The world around them is changing. And that's what the G-Man was the point the G-Man was trying to make was that I am putting you in this new time because I know that you're going to tear some shit up when you get there. And it makes you think twice about, well, what is the G-Man's purpose? It's certainly not in line with the Combines. He's not with the Combine, because if he was, why would he send Freeman in to destroy the Combine? Because that was what the G-Man's intention was. So, I don't know how I felt about that scene being cut. I liked it a bit more than the opening scene that they used, because the opening scene that they used was very cryptic, and this would have been clearer. But that having been said, I also would have liked to have seen the area that they were in and everything else. I don't know why I'm sure they chopped it down simply because of timing and pacing and everything else. The other thing was that originally Gordon was not supposed to appear in City 17 by train, but he was actually supposed to arrive by ship on, of all things, the Borealis. He was going to actually appear on this. I think that because they felt that the first Half-Life game, Gordon arrives on a train, let's do a boat this time. It's something different. And they had it be an icebreaker tanker kind of thing where he arrives on by boat. I don't know why I think they changed it simply because they felt maybe the train worked better. But what they were also trying to show was that scene on the train would have actually been much longer. It would have been clearer that Gordon had appeared on the train. What would have happened would have been that there would have been somebody else on the train. Gordon would have started choking based upon the fact of the atmosphere was no longer breathable after what the Combine was doing to it. A guy on the train would have had an extra gas mask given it to Gordon and said, hey, yeah, I had a gas mask fail on me when I was working the air processors. I swore never again, so just keep a spare on me, man. I don't know how you got on here, but here you go. This will help you breathe. And then he would have arrived that way. It was a really cool scene, but I think, again, kind of lengthy. The train sequence is actually very, very, very short in the final version. But I think it would have been cool for establishing the setting just as cool, But then again, maybe I think Valve kind of adopted the whole thing as like show, not tell kind of thing. And when you arrive in the train station, you can certainly see that oppression is going on. You have Breen looking at you and that sort of thing. So maybe, again, that's why they cut it down. Other cool things I thought would have been really nice would have been, they don't really tell you exactly what was going on in the interim of the time you were gone. Which was kind of disappointing. Anybody who had played through Half-Life 1 certainly would have wanted to have known what was going on. And really, the only thing that they had in the final version of the game was kind of told you about what was going on was when you show up at Black Mesa East. And it's optional entirely if you find some of those clippings that are on the wall. Eli will simply tell you that there was a resistance against that the Combine showed up after the Resonance Cascade had opened. And they had gone through it, and Dr. Breen had basically been given the authority to fight. The battle lasted literally 7 hours before all of Earth's defenses were destroyed by the Combine. And, oh god, what happened? And Dr. Breen would have basically surrendered. And in exchange for that, the Combine gave him basically Earth authority, or full authority over Earth. That's all that you really heard in the final version of the game. But originally it was going to be much different. Dr. Kleiner was going to give you almost a slideshow where he would have basically went over what was going on in the interim of the years that you were gone. And I thought it would have made for a cool scene. It would have been kind of boring, but then again, for Half-Life lovers, it would have been interesting to see it. They would have explained that the Resonance Cascade, nobody blamed him for it. Nobody had animosity towards Gordon for causing the Resonance Cascade. They all felt everybody that was involved in Black Mesa felt responsibility for it, just because Gordon was the one who did it. Did not, everyone equally felt responsible because it was their experiment just as much as it was his. So there would have been that. There also would have been the fact of what had happened after he had left was that the Resonance Cascade had continued. And all of these creatures from Zen had started appearing. You would have seen images of like children jumping into pools that all of a sudden there was like something really nasty in there, ready to eat the kid and that kind of thing. So it would have been kind of funny in that respect. And it would have shown that there was a resistance against when the Combine showed up just out of the blue. said, "Oh, we tried to put up a resistance, and it would have showed them all destroyed, and it would have shown that Breen, in the end, would have had basically used all the authority that he had been given by the Earth, by all the people of Earth, and used it to surrender." I'm sure Breen at the time probably thought he was doing the right thing, but I think he got corrupted over the years. I don't know. But that all aside, I thought it would have been for a cool sequence, and I know that Black Mesa East was, I think Black Mesa East was probably one of my favorite levels in the game. I really wish it had been longer. You're kind of teased with things like just the Vortigaunt's training and stuff like that. It was kind of cool. I wish that it had been longer. But I think they cut that scene for time. After that, there actually were some boss fights that were cut. I know everybody's going to ask me to talk about the Hydra battle, which was shown in E3 2003, where you saw this translucent tentacled creature come out of water, kill Combine immediately by literally sticking a tentacle through, one hit kill. And then Gordon was going to have to fight it with a pistol. It looked cool. It was certainly threatening, but Valve cut it because it was no fun to play. It was just no fun fighting it. And to be perfectly honest, when you got something that powerful, with just with tentacles and stuff like that, it's like, it wouldn't have been fun. It really wouldn't have. Another, since I'm talking about boss fights, there actually was going to also be an Antlion King. And I know a lot of you were saying, well, there was an Antlion boss actually in Nova Prospect that you fought. Wasn't that the king? No, actually that was Antlion Guard. And that was a cool boss fight, don't get me wrong. And that was also another fight that was shown in Half-Life 2, the Half-Life 2 E3 demos. But the cool thing about that was that there was actually going to be a very, 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 very big antlion that you were going to have to fight. Like about 60 feet tall. And you would have to kind of weave between his legs in order to attack it. I guess that was supposed to represent that it was like the father of the antlions, or birthing the antlions, or the leader of the antlions, or something like that. As such, it never made it to the final version of the game, but there is a creature called the Antlion King, and in fact, there's also a creature called the Antlion Queen that made an appearance in Half-Life 2 Episode 2, although they were relatively normal size. They were nowhere near as big as they looked or originally designed to be. So that was kind of a downside of that. You also possibly were going to fight those things, I can't remember what they're called, the advisors, I think they were called, the Combine Advisors. They also had the thought that maybe you might have been able to fought those, but that I'm sure they're probably saving for Episode 3 if they ever actually talk about it, which I don't know. The cool thing was that was explained that those guys were in fact true Combine. The creatures that we'd seen, like the Combine, Metro Police and stuff like that, were not actually Combine, they were kind of just adapted humans and stuff like that. Stalkers were not Combine, they were adapted humans. True Combine really couldn't exist on this end of the portal. Instead, they kind of just existed separately. They existed on their end. And just kind of adapted the world from afar, basically. And it would have also shown that Breen originally, since you kind of saw that you only saw Dr. Breen in television screens, that was going to be something that was relevant because it would have shown that Dr. Breen actually was not human. When you saw his face, he looked human. But originally it was going to be that Dr. Breen was not human, and that he had at one time been human, but by the time you finally see him in the last level, you would have shown that he was kind of, still had his human face, but he was in the process of becoming immortal, like he had talked about in some of the earlier levels. He had started the process of immortality, and as such he kind of looked very, like he was in the process of becoming alien, becoming Combine. And he was doing that because he wanted to go on the other end. I think the reason why they cut that out is because they really wanted somebody that, if you're going to have an adversary like Dr. Breen, it helps to have a human adversary. Like a human adversary against a human protagonist works really well. There's drama to that. There's tension to that. When you have an adversary of something along the lines of an alien slug or something like that, like a human face, it doesn't have the same dramatic tension as fighting a human being. So they established very early on, when they changed the policy to make Breen completely human and stay human, they had made the decision, or I guess they had changed it so that you confront Dr. Breen very early, although just briefly, but very early, and you see that he is in fact indeed a human being and always has been. And that just kind of shows something different. I think they decided to do something different, and I totally respect that. As for things that were cut, I think probably the biggest cut that they actually made to the final version of the game was this thing called the Combine Air Processor. And just going back to what I was talking about earlier, where it was to show that the Combine were in the process of also adapting they were draining the oceans, they were adapting the atmosphere to something that that was no longer really being breathable by humans. That was something that was going to be clearer. That you did see, of course, that the oceans were starting to be drained, of course, but the air was not really changed in the final version of the game. They didn't really talk about it. The people weren't walking around with gas masks, just the Combine. And I think the reasoning why was probably because of the air polluter actually being taken out. Originally, Eli was not Alex's father. Alex's father originally was going to be this guy called Captain Vance. He was a captain in the Combine army, but he actually secretly was going to be a resistance fighter. What had happened was that he was his position was to protect the Combine air converter, and that was and a level was going to be that you were going to have to destroy it. And it would have been for a cool level because it would have made Gordon was going to have to work with an AI-controlled Captain Vance. They would have had to work together in order to bring the place down in order to stop the air conversion from happening. It would have struck a heavy blow to the resistance, to the Combine, and been a good morale boost for the Resistance, and basically a good morale boost for humanity in general. It was cut when it was cut. I don't know if they cut it for time reasons or pacing reasons or what, but when they cut it, Captain Vance got cut out entirely, and Eli became Alex's father. Eli was always going to be in the game, but he was just Eli. He was not Alex's father originally. When they changed and cut out Captain Vance, Eli became Eli Vance and became Alex's father. So they adapted that. The cool thing was that they actually kept Captain Vance in the game. His model was actually used as or I should say his face model, was used actually as a hostage in Counter-Strike Source. If you play Counter-Strike Source, one of the hostages actually has the Captain Vance face. Not the body, I think but the face certainly. So, yeah, there was, like I said, there was just some other things that were cut too. But the thing about it was that some of the stuff that was cut was written was never really intended for mass production and stuff like that. They were just ideas that were used to flesh out characters or give inspiration to developers and give inspiration to the artists or the actors and stuff like that. Like, I know many pages were written about Alex, but that was just kind of to flesh out her spirit, flesh out her personality and stuff like that. That was never intended to be a level in the game or anything like that. It was never intended for that sort of thing. It was just kind of to help the developers or the designers or the actors. It wasn't, like I said, Alex was never a playable character in the game, certainly. So there was that, So it was never those kind of, whatever was written kind of about her for backstory was not really anything more than just kind of fleshing out the spirit of the character, not levels cut from the game. So those are just a few things that I can remember that were cut off the top of my head. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Half-Life 2, and I really like the final version of it very much. And like I said, I think the whole reason why I like Half-Life 2 that much is because it really does show that this is what happens when you take a free human being, you put him in that situation, and then through luck or fate or whatever, that person gets a weapon in their hand, and all hell, he will literally start an entire revolution. And I think that's what the G-Man was talking about. And I think the point was that really what was cut was really just stuff that would have made that clearer. It was still in the final version of the game made quite clear. You just had to read between the lines and kind of get that deeper understanding of the game. So maybe this was a good idea that some of these sequences were cut, but like I said, I would have certainly liked to have seen some of them. I would have certainly liked to have played some of them. I played some of the sequences. I would have loved to have played the air purifier sequence. That would have been really cool. But then again, Antlion King did end up in Half-Life 2 Episode 2. For all I know, some of this stuff could end up in later Half-Life games. So that would be very interesting to see. Like some of the stuff I told you, like the Combine Air Purifier, the Combine Air Exchange and stuff like that, or levels on the trams and stuff like that. For all we know, could end, the Borealis certainly will probably end up in the next Half-Life game. So I mean, they don't just throw out those design documents. They keep them sure they can publish them, but they could keep them. And for all I know, what I'm saying could end up in Half-Life 3 or Half-Life 2 Episode 3 or something like that. I don't know. But in case you're curious what my source is, it's this book. You can find it. By all means, it's a great read. It's beautiful art. Actually, a cool little story. I don't know, but yeah. Really love this picture. Really did. So that's what was cut from Half-Life 2. Obviously, there probably was more stuff that I don't even know about. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. And like I said, going to be talking about more of the old school PC stuff. I mean, GameAccess.net, my whole mentality was formed around the Generation X. Was formed around those old school PC games I used to play back in the late 90s and stuff like that. So why not talk more about them? So I'm going to be talking about, probably my next podcast is probably going to be about Unreal and the Unreal series. Certainly that includes Unreal Tournament. Until next time, guys, this is Maniac with GameAccess.net. Thanks for watching. Over and out. And Valve, I want my Half-Life 3.